What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you ladies and gentlemen. We still have our areas of interest looking pretty interesting out here in the Atlantic Ocean. We have our subtropical system potentially organizing and developing out near the Azores Islands. We have a bunch of convection firing off the coast of the Leeward Islands, and we have this Caribbean area of interest that is continuing to show more and more signs of development and quick development pretty soon. So we have a lot to talk about in today's video, so let's go ahead and dive right into it. Here's what we have going on so far. We have a 70% chance, a 10% chance, and a 40% chance of development for all these areas of interest. We're going to go ahead and start with the subtropical area of interest first, kind of go over that real quickly, and then work our way down. A low-pressure system located a few hundred miles west of the Azores Islands has been producing increased convection near its center over the past few hours. Early satellite-derived wind data depicts winds to storm force mainly to the south of the center. Environmental conditions appear favorable for some additional development of the system that could become a subtropical or subtropical storm as it moves generally eastward during the next few days. Interest in the Azores should monitor the progress of this system. Additional information can be found in the high seas forecast through the NWS. 40% probability in the next 48 hours and in the next 7 days as well. This really jumped up from earlier. We were at a 10% about a few hours ago. Now we're up to 40%. So the NHC definitely saw some stuff going on over there. And looking at satellite, you can see why. This system's definitely organizing the closer it gets towards the Azores Islands, so we're going to have to pay attention to that as well. We have this area of interest out here in the Caribbean Sea. A trough of low pressure is located near Puerto Rico and producing a large area of showers and thunderstorms over portions of the Greater Antilles and the adjacent waters of the Atlantic and northeastern Caribbean. Slow development of the system is possible during the next few days as it moves west-northwestward near the Greater Antilles. After that time, this system is expected to be absorbed into the low pressure over the Caribbean. Regardless of development, locally heavy rains are possible during the next several days from the northern Leeward Islands westward across Puerto Rico and Hispaniola to eastern Cuba and the southeastern Bahamas. We now have a 10% probability of development in the next 48 hours, 10% in the next 7 days as well. So that's definitely something we're going to have to watch in terms of flash flooding-wise, especially for the DR, Puerto Rico, the Antilles, Virgin Islands, and eastern Cuba as well. We're going to have to watch that and easily pay attention to that as we get more data and more information, and as it merges with this area of interest right here as we continue to watch this. And this is very interesting. This is something, this is language you do not want to hear from the National Hurricane Center right now. A broad area of low pressure is likely to develop over the southwestern Caribbean Sea during the next day or so. Remember, this is a 70% probability of development, and they're already saying that there's going to be development in the next day or so. This is going to be interesting to see how this pans out. Gradual development is possible thereafter, and a tropical depression is likely to form late this weekend or early next week while the system drifts generally northward or northwestward over the central or western Caribbean Sea. Regardless of development, locally heavy rains are possible over portions of the adjacent land areas of the western Caribbean, 30% in the next 48 hours, 70% in the next 7 days. So we're going to have to pay attention to that, but regardless of that, you do not want to hear this language of a low-pressure system likely to develop in the next day or so in the Caribbean Sea. Now, that's most likely going to be kind of your general area of interest, your general invest right there, but you definitely do not want to hear that, especially with a 70% probability of development. This system, once convection starts organizing and once we start seeing some rotation, we'll start getting that invest tag in the next little while. So, of course, we're going to have to pay attention to that. And then from then on out, given the conditions that it has under its belt, it's going to be off to the races, and we're going to have to pay very, very close attention to that. But let's go ahead and show you some satellite imagery. Here's what we have going on across much of the Atlantic. Subtropical Atlantic over here. You're starting to see that organization really ramping up. You're starting to see that center become more and more defined as it approaches the Azores Islands. The Azores Islands is already getting hit pretty heavily by a lot of rainfall and a lot of convection. in the area. So we're going to have to pay a very close attention to that right there. But regardless of that, we are seeing that rotation tightening up. You're starting to see that spin really start to ramp up. That's why they went with the 40% probability, because satellite imagery was saying, okay, this is a lot more organized than we thought it would be. And because before, if we go ahead and go back to this a little bit, I believe it was at 20%. Yes, it was at 20% in the North Atlantic. They dropped it to 10% right here, and then they increased it to 40% right there, and that's because they saw this was a lot more organized than anticipated. So that's definitely something to watch. Main threat is shipping concerns and the Azores Islands, so we're going to have to pay attention to that as well. And they also mentioned in their advisory as well that their early satellite-derived wind data depicted winds of tropical storm force mainly to the south of the center, so we're going to have to pay attention to that as well, especially as it heads towards the Azores Islands. You're also paying attention to this area of interest in the Atlantic Ocean, that massive blob of convection. Let's go ahead and pull that up right now. This massive blobular convection right here, it's not really going to do that much. A lot of it is because it's been heavily sheared, and it's really not going to do that much. I'm not too concerned of it developing or not. The main things I am concerned about with this system right here are two things. The first thing I'm concerned about is the primary development in terms of if this is going to end up moving into the Caribbean Sea and merging with that. That's the first thing I'm concerned about. But the main thing I'm concerned about, at least in the short term, is flash flooding, especially across Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic and all those islands I mentioned earlier, particularly Puerto Rico, because they've been because this is where the center of circulation is close to, and the fact that Puerto Rico's infrastructure still isn't fantastic, from Maria, from Fiona, from a bunch of other storms that have been moving through. It's just not been fantastic over there, and flash flooding is the last thing I know that Puerto Rico needs. Same with Haiti as well. Haiti does absolutely not need this flash flooding, especially as these heavy rains push further and further to the west as the days continue to go on. But we'll have to pay attention to that right now. In terms of this area of interest out here in the Caribbean Sea, well, you're starting to see some more convection firing up in the next few hours, which is pretty interesting, off the coast of Nicaragua and Costa Rica and those areas right there. That's something to pay attention to going forward. That's something we're going to have to watch long term. But right now, as we continue to look at, it's more or less some of the more of that popcorn and convection I've noticed right now. You're not seeing a consistent area of blow up right here where you see a huge area of minus 60, minus 70 cloud tops that just fire off up over and over and over and over again and sustain itself. Right now, you're just seeing that go up for a couple hours, then drop down, go up for a couple of hours, then drop down. Ultimately, not too much to be worried about right now, but that's going to be changing in the next few days. If we go ahead and show you water vapor imagery as well. Water vapor imagery, the Caribbean's gotten a lot more moist, especially in the Western Caribbean over here, especially in this part of the Caribbean where this whole blob of convection is mixing out, and we're going to have to pay close attention to that. And you're also noticing more and more convection and more of this mixing happening in the Eastern Caribbean as well. And if this system right here merges with this low pressure system that's expected to organize and develop the future invest that is, and do that, it's going to give it a huge boost in moisture and convection, and that would be the absolutely last thing we'd want to see, because if this system has sustaining convection and it is able to achieve it either by itself or through other means right here from the east, that would basically give it a good starter package to really ramp up. It would have the DLC all ready to go once that convection from the Atlantic over here moves over there. It would have the DLC for your favorite game, and then you're off to the races right there. So that's kind of the stuff we're watching, and we're going to have to pay attention to that as well. And let's go ahead and also take a look at the true viz imagery right here, the true color, just to kind of give a general idea of what we're looking at. Overall, true color is pretty interesting. Yeah, you can definitely start seeing that convection starting to fire off a little bit. You're definitely starting to see a little bit of an area of rotation. I am noticing that a bit more now than I did before. You're also noticing a little bit of an area of rotation going on near Puerto Rico and those areas. So you're going to have to watch these systems, and we will continue to keep you updated on this here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Let's go ahead and pull up some conditions now. Let's go ahead and start with the global sea surface temperatures. Global sea surface temperatures are going to be pretty interesting, to say the very least. And in terms of what we're looking at in the subtropical Atlantic, like I said in yesterday's video, it's not going to be that warm, much warm water. It's likely going to be a subtropical storm of about 50 miles per hour sustained at the very most. And that's what I'm expecting with this. The Azores Islands are definitely going to get hammered by this. They're already getting hammered by this, like by the bands that are kind of moving in front of this system over there. But it's not going to be that bad over there. And especially not comparison to what we're looking at in the Caribbean Sea. We have a lot better conditions over there for this part of the year. It's November 1st, and we're already still calling for tropical development to happen. One last hurrah before the hurricane season finally ends across much of the region. In terms of what we're looking at over Puerto Rico, 29 to 30 degrees Celsius waters, very good water temperatures right there to help sustain convection. Gonna have to watch that. But in terms of the Caribbean, we're still seeing those same water temperatures, but those waters are going down a lot deeper. It's not gonna be like 29 degrees Celsius at the surface, and then like 5 meters down, it drops down to like 20. It doesn't work like that. These waters are very warm, and they are very deep, and that's the main things you need to pay attention to, especially in this part of the Caribbean Sea, where this is expected to develop and expected to move through. It's expected to move into 30 degrees Celsius waters, jerk off to the west, move into 29 degrees Celsius waters. It's expected to remain there until it enters the Gulf of Mexico, that's where it's going to go, as some consensus is suggesting, and then from there, then on out, cooler waters will weaken it down the road. So that's the main things we're going to have to pay attention to. The other scenarios are this system hits the western tip of Cuba and pushes it closer to Florida, or it hits the Yucatan Peninsula, weakens due to land interaction, and then we'll have to see what happens from there. But there will be a lot more dry air in the Gulf of Mexico if that were where the system would be going, if that were the case. So it'd be a bit of a trade-off. Yes, it would be absolutely devastating for much of the Yucatan Peninsula, but in terms of the long-term threat, in terms of threat for the United States, Texas, northeastern Mexico, Louisiana, the Gulf Coast, it won't be as great of a threat, particularly because of these cooling sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. If we go ahead and show you the ocean heat content, it kind of reinforces my statement. We're going to go ahead and go to the month of November right here. Let's go ahead and go to November 1st. Of 2024. We have to pull up a new set of maps every month. But here's the OHC. If you go ahead and look at the Gulf of Mexico, yeah, there is still quite a bit of OHC in the loop current, but there's not as much as there was before in the Western Gulf. Not nearly as much as there was in the continental shelf right here, as it's approaching Florida over here. But you still have this massive tank of OHC across much of the Caribbean and all those areas. A lot of this stuff is still relatively untapped from last year, but also a lot of it is new from this year. So it's kind of that combination where you're going to see we're going to see a lot of OHC from last year and new OHC from this year play in. And the more OHC the system takes in, the stronger it gets, but the quicker it cools the waters. And we'll have to pay attention to it, especially for next year, for 2025. That hurricane season, if we see another situation like we did this year where there's a lot of OHC, hopefully this system will cool it off while not affecting very many people or any people at all. That would be the most ideal situation. If it could just linger in the Caribbean Sea and be so small that it self-implodes on itself and weakens and not affects anyone, that would be brilliant. That would be a great case study, just like Kirk was, just like Sam was in 2021. It'd be a fantastic case study, but unfortunately, science and reality does not play into that, and we'll have to, or this is why we are watching this, and this is why we are concerned about this area of interest right there. But regardless of that, 175 plus OHC, where the system's going to be headed at first, it's going to move to the west, and then it's going to be heading into another area of 175 OHC in the northwestern Caribbean Sea. If it takes advantage of either of those pockets of OHC, it's going to be very interesting to see how this pans out, and I will be very concerned because here's the two areas of concern I'm worried about right now. What this system is going to do is, I've said this in yesterday's video, it's going to start off as a very broad center of circulation. Matter of fact, if you look at satellite, it is a relatively broad circulation. It's a really broad circulation, actually. It's not really that tight right now, and it's going to start off that way. But as time continues to go on, and as it starts to organize, that gradient and that area is going to start to tighten. So we're going to have to pay close attention to that. We're going to have to watch it very carefully, and we will continue to keep you updated on that. But here's my main concern right now. If it organizes and develops in this part of the Caribbean Sea near Jamaica, that's going to make the Jamaican impacts a lot worse and give the system a lot more of a base to move and kind of jump off of, and then continue its rate of intensification into the northwestern Caribbean Sea as it approaches the Yucatan, the eastern tip of Cuba, or the Gulf of Mexico. Well, not the eastern tip, the western tip of Cuba. If it were going to the eastern tip of Cuba, they would be pulling a Matthew 2016, but that's not going to be happening because of the high pressure system over Bermuda that's going to push it further to the west. That's the main reason it's going to be making such a drastic shift to the west. So I figured I'd make that very clear. But my main concern is if it organizes and develops in this part right here off the coast of Jamaica and Haiti, then it's going to go gangbusters pretty much all the way until it gets to the Gulf of Mexico. If it doesn't do that, and waits to organize until it gets to the northwestern Caribbean, then that would also be a bit of a problem because you still have a lot of those waters that are very untapped and anything can happen, and you have a lot more moist of an environment than you did before because yes, there's is some dry air right now, but there has been a moisture infusion across the western half of the Caribbean Sea especially, and that usually preludes tropical development when it happens. That's why the NHC tags this stuff, because you need the warm waters, you need the wind shear, you need the moist air, and you need the vorticity. All four of those things are going to be there with this system, and we're going to have to watch it. Let's go ahead and show you some ensemble runs real quickly. Actually, no, before we do that, let's go ahead and show you the wind shear map as of recently. Here's the latest wind shear that we can pull up for you right here. Wind shear across parts of Haiti and Puerto Rico have weakened a little bit, but there is still a lot of the 60, 50, 40 knot wind shear over here in where those thunderstorms are firing off right now. And in the Caribbean, you are seeing this wind shear starting to weaken a little bit. And it is expected to push out in the next few days. You're starting to see weaker wind shear start to infiltrate into parts of the southwestern Caribbean Sea right there. You're going to want to pay attention to it. You're also watching the Yucatan Peninsula. You're going to start seeing a low wind shear pattern moving in the next 48 hours or so, and that's going to be a main thing you're going to want to watch. Some ensemble runs very quickly before we get going. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this real quickly. Here's the Europeans data. We'll go ahead and use the 0Z with this. Let's go ahead and move the screen over as well. What you're looking at a lot more of a situation where there's a lot more of a westward shift according to the European ensemble than there has been before. You're going to have to watch that. I am a little skeptical as to how far west that's going to go. I'm a little mainly because of troughs, mainly because of all that stuff. But if we go ahead and show you the GFS ensembles as well, let's go ahead and go out to the 10 days right here. Here's the 12Z right here. It's also showing a more westward shift, which I am curious about, and we're going to have to pay attention to. But they're also showing a more of a scenario where the system actually impacts Jamaica head on and then heads towards the western tip of Cuba, which if that were to be the case, that would be relatively quite destructive for a lot of the residents in Jamaica that are still being recovering from Hurricane Beryl, and it'll also be relatively impactful for Cuba. Yes, they have more resources for hurricanes and all that stuff, but it'll still be a very powerful and very strong storm, and nothing on this whole list is something I want to see, and that's why we're continuing to cover this. That's why we're continuing to watch this, and that's why we will continue to update you here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out, helps us get more people engaged with weather. If you want to come hang out with us at Storms United and talk tropics, as well as a bunch of other fun stuff that we're doing over there, we're already talking about Thanksgiving in there. Be sure to join the Discord server. The link to that will be in the end screen. Also, shout out to Daniel as an official sponsor of the Pat's Path Predictor Patreon. If you want to support the channel more directly, be sure to join the official Pat's Path Predictor Patreon. It is the first link in the description down below. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.